Thank you very much for all four excellent presentations, and I think optimistic presentations. Tunisia is still work in progress, as we have heard, but at least it's going in the right direction, and we are very hopeful that it will continue and it will succeed. So we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm sorry, but we're running a little bit behind schedule, so please go ahead. Do we have a microphone? No, because it's recorded, so.
Dan Whitman at American University. Radwan, as we all know, was a great prophet 15 years ago. Very few people thought that Islam and democracy could even appear in the same sentence, but you were a prophet. And what happened in 2011 certainly bore you out. Every speaker has sort of addressed my question. In 2011, many of us were euphoric. We thought, oh, this is really astonishing. And then I think you, Radwan, in 2012, when asked, will this spread to the region, you were doubtful. And maybe that was the more prudent opinion. It did spread. And the results have not been good. There's been a lot of backsliding. So my question is, I'd like to hear from Tunisians. Do you feel that you are or could be part of an international movement? Your own transition is not consolidated. We get that. As you are working on making this heroic gesture, I agree it's heroic, as you're working internally, can you or should you be considered a model for other countries in the region?
Okay, thank you very much. Marina?
Thank you. Both representatives of the political parties put a lot of emphasis on the idea of consensus and the need for consensus. And I quite understand it in the political circumstances of Tunisia now. But where does consensus end? And where this focus on consensus ends up by undermining democracy? Because democracy, after all, requires a system of checks and balances. And if you are all, there is need for consensus on the basic rules of the game, but at this point you have an alliance between the two largest parties in the country that makes it virtually impossible for any opposition to develop, or any real opposition to develop. And that is not very good for a democratic process either. So I'd like to hear a bit more from you about this.
Okay. Jamal? Here. Yeah.
I need my Tunisian friends to bear with me. The news you brought out with excitement about the passing of the law of the municipal councils, I looked them up on Twitter. There is about 5, 6 tweets. 2 of them are mine. You need to lead. You need to give an example. You need to do something about it. I know you are very much reluctant because you are worried about the pressure you might get, because you know that there are enemies of democracy in Tunisia. But it is really unfortunate that this example, this shining light, is not being seen. And just later on, check how much the Arab world is giving attention to this great news. You are excited about it. There's hardly a mention of it. That shouldn't be. Even Al Jazeera did not report the news. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more, and then we'll go for a second round. Nader?
Andrew, that was a brilliant presentation. I can't wait to read the book that you are about to publish. So one theme that often emerges in terms of understanding Islamist politics, and Rashid Ghannouchi in Tunisia in particular, is this argument that some people have articulated that had the Tunisian Ennahdha party been able to obtain majority support in the first elections that came about, and had there not been these countervailing forces, that were forcing them to make compromises. That Ghanouchi's documented would not have been as progressive as it has become. In other words, there was a realization that, the most that Ennahdha could get was 40%. But if they could get 80%, there would be less of an incentive to make the type of compromises that Ghanouchi has developed over time, and they could have, proceeded in a much more majoritarian direction with less of a commitment to sort of liberal values and to respecting the rights of others. Do you have any thoughts on that particular, that particular hypothetical, option? That it was something unique to the, dynamic of the power distribution in terms of election results post 2011 that forced Ghanouchi to make these compromises. Because if you read some of his earlier writings, the one that I teach in my class about participation in non-Islamic government, that famous essay where he says, look, we don't have the option to realize our ideal sort of Islamist values because we're constrained under a dictatorship. But if we ever do have that option, then we will realize that particular sort of Islamist vision. This is, of course, in the late 1990s, which gives you a sense of where he was thinking at that time. So do you have any thoughts on that general sort of, hypothetical critique that sometimes, you hear with respect to Tunisian Islamist politics more broadly?
So we'll take very quick answers, please, because I want to do another round of questions. So please try to keep the answers very brief. Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I have 3 points, very quick points to make in response to that. One is that one thing I think about Ghanouchi is that his thought has always sort of bounced off what the currents were in going on in Tunisia at that time. So you had the bread riots in the late 1970s, and then he says, well, we've always been sort of committed to social justice. So there's always been a sense in which his particular understanding of Islam and Islam as a political doctrine has developed in relation to what else is going on and what's seen as what the pressures are from outside of the movement. And so it's not surprising that that should also be the case since 2011, that he has to make do with what reality has proposed. And so if they were a majoritarian party, first of all, I think there was some reluctance to be a majoritarian party because of the responsibility that comes with it. I think you definitely would have had a lot of symbolic differences, right? It would have been much easier to include some kind of symbolic reference to the Sharia or other sorts of things. But I do think that you would have had an attempt to create institutions that were very, very similar in form to the kinds of institutions that were created in 2014. But if these are offices that are held by people with different ideological persuasions, of course, the policy priorities are going to reflect that. But the third thing is I wanted to sort of invite Ousmane if he wants to say something about it. I think a lot of that depends on what the internal debates within Ennahdha were. So Ennahdha is a broad tent even within itself, right? It represents a lot of different ideological trends. And it'll be very interesting to know, if he's willing to speak about it, how strong the demand was within, whether it was the political bureau or others, for more ideological aims as opposed to meeting the the specific kinds of crisis politics that Tunisia was dealing with at that time. So it'd be interesting to know how much that there's something within the party that is being held back.
Okay, thank you. Khaled?
2 points. Maybe the first question of our friend there concerning the international support of our experience. I didn't have the feeling that we have received enough support. I give you an example. The last year, Tunisia mentioned in 2 blacklists, European blacklists. It's not, we can't understand that.
Not last year, this year.
Yeah, in 2017.
But one of them was 2018. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, recently.
Anyway, the last time.
Yeah.
The last time. And for us as Democrats, it's not acceptable. For example, the old regime of the President Ben Ali They didn't have this issue. It's not mentioned as two blacklists,
For
financial and
for
economic,
money laundering, and what's the other
anyway,
one?
it's not important. Any blacklist. Why you mention Tunisia in a blacklist? It's not acceptable. It's something unique in the Arab and Muslim worlds, and for us it was really painful. Maybe our relation with the states it's stable, or it's but the support, the American support, it's not also enough. We need more support for this experience could continue, especially in this time, the time of the international financial crisis. This is the concerning the first question. The second question is concerning consensus. Why we need consensus? I have mentioned two kinds of consensus. One is related to the deep level, to guarantee the respect of the democratic game rules, to have a new democratic constitution, to could develop this concept of civic state, because something new to resolve this conflict between these two big blocks, secularists and Islamists. We need consensus. Without consensus, we can't go on. I agree with you concerning the second kind of consensus related to the government. But when you see the results of the last elections, nobody, no party could make a government only. Like the situation, for example, in Germany. Finally, the socialists accepted to be with the Christian Democrats again in a coalition. It's also our case, our issue. Nidaa Tounes has 86 seats in 2014, and the Nahda has 69. We have a parliament of 217 seats. The majority is 109 seats. We didn't have enough majority to make a government with one party, or with two also. But this is limited on time. I think if we have new results, different results in after the election of 2019, maybe we make something different on this level. And I believe on alternance. But alternance when you have a stable democratic system. In this time, we didn't have that.
Okay, thank you. Oussama?
Yes, thank you. International support, actually, the US and the European countries are the main supporters of Tunisia. At the end, the democratic countries are the ones that are really supporting. Yes, there are some Arab countries, or maybe in 2012, 13, but at the end, the real main supporters are the democratic one. And this is important for us to tell here in the US that this support should continue from both sides, Democrats and Republicans. It's very important for us. Otherwise, this model, we're not going to talk about any model. We're going to face our difficulties mainly in the economic one, and we're going to lose our experience. So the achievement, it's important, and we need to support this and know-how and technical assistance. We're not talking only about money. We're not talking only about security engagement and support, which is very important, but we should diversify. Maybe we should not talk only about democracy and participation, which was something really important during the last 6-7 years. And about the blacklist, yes, it is true that was a bad, decision, and we blamed the European institutions, but at the same time, we have to take our responsibility of not doing and not implementing and not improving our financial system in Tunisia. It is not that bad, actually, and this is the wrong part, to put us in this kind of blacklist with some other countries where the situation is completely different. But at the same time, we have to assume our responsibility. And in fact, in few months, we're going to be out of those blacklists. When the consensus is going to end. At the end, let's say that it's not a consensus 100%. We have a lot of differences today. Transitional justice is one, and there are other differences at other level. Less, not that very, very important, but we have differences. The way that we're facing is sitting around the table and trying to find agreements, and sometimes we don't find any agreement, and there are examples of this. At the end, we need to think and to recognize that democratic transitions need large majorities, very large majorities. No one can face the challenges that you have in front of you. So until we arrive to a situation where the country is really stable, where the constitution is very well implemented, think about the point that I recognize the Constitutional Court is not there yet, and so on. So maybe by the next election or the one after, we're going to have a stable country. At the end, the consensus was not a choice. No one, نداء Tounes, presented a government that stood there less than 24 hours because they didn't have the numbers of votes. And then we sit around the table and we managed to have a government, and today, again and again, we're going to find solutions and go on. But yes, no one is thinking consensus forever. Check and balances, it's really important. And we have those instruments in our constitution. So the system was not built to have only consensus way. It is the transition period that oblige us to adopt this until we stabilize our country. We don't need to change any constitution. We're going slowly move to a normal situation, normal democracy with all its difficulties and not the difficulties of a democratic transition. Media in Tunisia, yes, it's really a problem. Maybe we have to talk more, and I believe this achievement of today, it is really, really important. I worked for this at least 1 year and a half, talking only about this law without talking about the period and the part in the constitution that we did. This law is not perfect. We have a lot of articles that I don't like, but this is consensus. This is what we can achieve today. And maybe years later, we're going to see what is going to work, what is not going to work, and we're going to change it. So at the end, I can say that it is an important achievement. It is clear, again and again, if there is a reason that Tunisia is not presented in the Arab world, because people are afraid. And in Tunisia, actually, we don't have this way of thinking that we have a successful model, let's present it and let's export it. Because we didn't start from any model. We started from a white paper. We tried to learn from all the experience that we had in the region. And we tried to put on the table our problems. Quickly on the points that you talked about, honestly, since 2013, I don't remember very well when we opened discussions on ideological issues. It's political. Mainly after the last Congress, the National Conference in 2 years ago. There was a lot of ideological during the time of the work on the Constitution, and after the Constitution, a lot of work presenting the papers, the official papers for the Congress for the decision of the separation between dawah and politics, and some other issues, what is our policy for the country and so on. But after that, I don't remember very well. Yes, last few months, but it is a political way of talking. The President of the Republic is thinking of presenting a proposal about the Mirath heritage. So it is again somehow connected. So the debate is going to still to be there, but I feel it is more political, less ideological.
Thank you. Eric, you have anything to add?
Perhaps something on the consensus question. I mean, pure consensus is never going to be achieved. It can only be imposed. And I think that accepting that reality with some humility is really important for democracy to survive. It forces us to focus, I think, on what was referred to as deep consensus, about ensuring that we all understand that the union can't be broken, and that now that you have a constitution, one must also begin to develop and internalize a tradition of constitutionalism, a love for that polity that was formed, and understanding that that polity is in part what allows us to carry on the conversation about what our politics are about. That is the fundamental institution that I think Tunisia is still lacking, that deep sense within the parties, within Nidaa Tounes and in Ennahdha, from my perspective. There still is a lot of doubt about whether there is actually people on the other side, or for that matter within the party, who have all agreed on the rules of the Constitution. And that doubt leads to fear about what the other side or what other actors within the parties are doing. And that fear has very adverse political effects. And the challenge now is to have leaders who can help to build that tradition of constitutionalism going forward, to be able to work through these problems and to know that a perfect consensus is not within our reach. It never will be in our reach if we also choose to remain free.
I'd like also to answer very quickly the question about Tunisia as a model. And I think Tunisians in general, especially now, are really afraid to use that language as a model for two reasons. First of all, because they will be seen as a threat to other regimes and other countries in the region, and Tunisia can't afford that right now. But the second one is because Tunisia really, they don't see themselves as a model yet. It's work in progress, and it's way too early to talk about a model. They have made progress, and they think Tunisians are proud of the progress they have made, but they certainly don't see themselves as a model yet. There are still many, many challenges. And we have learned from the experience of other countries, as was mentioned, I think, by Khaled, that transitions take roughly 20 years. So we still have about 12 more years to complete our transition, inshallah, God willing. And then maybe Tunisia will become a model in 12 years from now. It's too early, despite all this enthusiasm and progress, to talk about a model. And frankly, if you talk to Tunisians on the ground, and as you know, I spend a lot of time in Tunisia, a lot of Tunisians are not happy with the situation right now in Tunisia. And they will laugh at you if you say Tunisia is a model. They will say, what are you talking about? So we have to be realistic. I think Tunisia has made a lot of progress, especially compared to the other countries. I think consensus is the key to keeping the unity. And that has not worked in other countries, and we see what happens when you don't have that consensus between the parties. Consensus is not going to solve all the problems, but at least it has kept peace, and it has kept stability and progress, and Tunisia moving forward. But I think we still have a lot of challenges, especially the economic ones. And then if Tunisia becomes a model, we don't need to talk about it, because you don't need, a model doesn't need to, it speaks about itself. It doesn't need people to advertise for it. It will become attractive by itself. But I think we're still far from that. I think we still have a lot of work to do. So thank you very much for this panel. I'm sorry we ran out of time for questions.